Welcome, adventurer. I'm Gian Goblin, and today I'm going to tell you how I get my little goblins into the world of TTRPGs, one step at a time, and eventually how I introduce them to actual play and what system I use. Before we get started, remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you can see all the new content as it comes up. So for those of us in the States, this week is kind of a holiday for us. So some of us, outside of getting together with family, maybe you're going to be having a whole bunch of kids around the table this week, or maybe you just have a little extra time with your own kids. I wanted to tell you how I got my children, and my oldest especially, into the tabletop RPG world, and how I've also done it with my nieces and nephews. The best way to do it is to start off slow. They're going to want to migrate and gain interest in anything that you do or they see you doing, especially if it's on a regular basis. As you know, kids pick up everything. So seeing you play or being around in at least a loose fashion whenever you're having your games is a great way for them to have their interest piqued. For them to see either the figures that you use or the dice, to be able to watch you on your virtual tabletop and see all the things you do. At least if it doesn't bother everyone else at your table. For me, one thing is to give them one of the books that we have. Monster Manual is a great book. There is, if your child's old enough to read, Dungeons and Dragons has a Young Adventurers collection, which is really digestible, and it talks about either some of the monsters that you find in the setting or magic or something like that. My kids liked those. Monster Manual was the biggest hit with both of my kids because they got to look at it, and then as my older one learned to read, he would go through and just read the Monster Manual for that edition. And we get them into either watching the fantasy movies that you watch, the new Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out a while back, any of the movies or books, Lord of the Rings, those kind of things, get them into this world so we can begin to influence them into wanting to join our table. Now, when it comes to the actual gaming itself, a lot of kids just want to play with dice, move your figures around, ruin your battle maps with permanent markers. But the setting and what you start them on isn't important. Now, it might be important for how it's delivered to them, but it shouldn't be important which setting you use, even if it's 4th edition. So depending on the age of your kid, maybe 4th edition, maybe Pathfinder 1st edition, maybe Dungeons and Dragons 5e is better. Maybe something simpler. I started mine off with an easy system where he wanted to create this fanciful magic sword-wielding skeletal character. And after talking to him at the age of 4, maybe 5, realizing that he's not going to remember any of the rules in any of these settings, no matter how dumbed down they are. So I started off with, okay, tell me what he looks like. And you can draw a picture, or you can find one, use AI. And we gave him a name, and I made him a little character sheet. And it didn't matter if I used any stat creation rules. It didn't matter what edition. All I did was let him see what he was dreaming of come to life on a character sheet. Something to spark that interest, to get those feels going. And so if he had a sword, all right, so I gave his sword an attack. And it was nothing but, at the time, simple math. So it was +3 or +5 to his attack. And you roll a 1d10 for the damage. And he wanted to be able to shoot fireballs. Okay, so the fireball did the exact same thing. And if they want to make magic, then you do the same thing. You let them describe what spells. You don't make them memorize spells. I know people that, regardless if it's Pathfinder or 5th edition or 3.5, that they can't remember spells anyway, and they're adults. So maybe it's a little much for our kids. When I go, and they're that young, I go simply by the rule of cool. If they want to do it, tell me. Describe me how it is, and I will narrate how the world reacts around you. This may not have a basis in your rule set for your edition, for 5e or Pathfinder 1 or 2 or whatever. But what you're doing is you're laying the groundwork for the love of the game and the love for being at a table and interacting with people in a story and creating their own story. And it can help not just in them playing, but in them writing their own story. My kid wants to learn animation so he can create these stories that he makes up in his mind now, just on his own. And so, dumb it down. Make it simple. If it's a skill check, pass or fail, roll a 20-sided dice. They get to roll the dice, so they get to have that physical interaction. Pop out a map, let them see things, describe things in ridiculous ways, and just let it go. Have fun, and just try and make them enjoy the time that you get to spend with them. Regardless of where you end up taking your little adventures, whether it's through your own simple, just roll D10 system, or if maybe they advance far enough that they can start to pick up on some of the other editions, regardless if it's Pathfinder or 5e, maybe you are tired of running through either your own makeshift adventures or running through some of your children's books, which is another great way to get them involved. If they happen to have a book that they like, running adventures is either those characters or alongside that story to add on to it. It will assist them in creating their own adventures and pretending, as well as getting them into your table. Now, if you wanted to get some material offline, there's a few modules, depending on which edition you want to use, or easily just transfer it into however you're playing and use the storyline, that I've heard are fairly kid-friendly. Inspired adventures for young minds, as I've heard, is really good, and you'll be able to grab it along with a monthly piece of content to assist you and to run with your little adventures. Running a Pathfinder module like We Be Goblins is not just a zany, fun way for you to spend time with your friends, but a way for you to get your children into it. And is kind of a classic. Monster Slayers, I've heard a little bit about on the forums. It's kind of a addition to anything with the Heroes of Hesiod. And I've heard it explains things well, but I have not actually ran it with any of the kids in my family. I've heard a few things about Revenge of the Kobold King, that it's fine to run with kids. It's running through kobolds, and it's a little bit better than the previous one, which is, I believe, was Return of the Kobold King. That had some abduction in it. You might have needed to change a few things in it, as I remember, to make it kid-friendly, at least for everyone. And the Hollow's Last Hope, I don't remember reading it, but I had someone suggest that it was actually okay for younger adventurers. But like anything else, you're going to want to read through it yourself to make sure, pick out the things that your adventurers are not ready for, and then put in things that you need to. I mean, Candyland with some 3D figures and dice will be just fine as long as it'll go with them. And then as they're older, they can get into different settings. I did Rise of the Rune Lord partially with my niece whenever I got their family into the game. And I am probably about to run a homemade system using the same D20 simple system that I mentioned at the start for my 5-year-old nephew and my son. So whatever you do, whatever you need to use to not only spend time with them, but to bring them into the hobby and the enjoyment that we have. And more importantly, spend time with them so that the things you love press on to the little guys that you love. And then maybe one day you're all sitting at a table sharing the things you love together. If you like this video, check out my others. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any tips or requests, drop them in the comments below. And until next time, may your crits be epic, your adventures legendary, and your gaming table filled with laughter.